will follow up with the questions and concerns submitted. There's a chat box for questions and comments. It's being monitored throughout the evening. Hopefully, there will be time to ask some of these questions if they were not answered in the chat. There will be a little time at the end for live questions, which will allow people participating by phone to be heard. Please limit your question to 1 minute. You will be muted if it is longer. Please take turns speaking. This format only works when the audience is muted until the question period. If you're on the phone, use *6 to mute or unmute. Your cooperation is appreciated. And now I'd like to hand it over to our moderator, Carlene Braithwaite. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you for this third town hall for New York City Fair. And tonight we have a lot to accomplish. As Elliot indicated, we have a lot of information that we want to convey, and we've got a full panel of experts here for you. I would like to start this evening by going through briefly, but giving you a sense of who these folks are on our panel, so you can understand why they are here, and hopefully why you should pay attention to what they're saying, because for the topics we're discussing tonight, these individuals are working on these issues every day. So let me start and move through this. So we have Elizabeth Betsy Lyman. She's the Chief Program Officer at AHRC. She was a subject matter expert for KPMG, and she developed strategy for implementation of their value-based payment models for Medicaid. She was also a VP at Citizens Budget Commission. She also significantly served with DOE in their Office of Special Education. As we all know, AHRC is one of the largest not-for-profit providers of services in New York. We have also Fredda Rosen. Fredda is the Executive Director of JobPath. She started in 1980 there as the director of their Staten Island office, rose through the ranks, helped to spin off JobPath as a single independent not-for-profit. And JobPath offers customized job search, job coaching, job support for individuals with developmental disabilities. Glenn Godden was the Associate Executive Director for Transportation at IATS. He has more than 20 years of service with them. And Glenn served as the Director for Member Services and developed managed care training, and he is responsible for the development and implementation of related services network. We have Irene Cavanaugh. She is the Associate Executive Director for Eden 2. Irene is responsible for all OPWDD programs at Eden 2. And Eden 2 specializes in providing services to children and adults with autism using ABA, the Applied Behavioral Analysis Approach. And they offer services in New York City, principally on Staten Island and in Brooklyn, and in Nassau and Suffolk counties on the island. We also have Linda Temple. Linda is the Executive Director for HeartShare. HeartShare provides services for those with developmental disabilities and has done so since 1914. HeartShare and Linda are grounded in their strong belief in community inclusion and person-centered delivery of services. They are responsible for creating one of the first community residences for people with IDD. And over the years, they have opened and run numerous residences and supportive apartments and early childhood centers. We have also Ravi Dahiya. He's the Chief Program Officer at YAI. YAI is also one of the largest providers of services to the IDD community in New York. Ravi rejoined YAI after a decade of service at Innovative Resources for Independence. He was the Associate Executive Director, and he has more than 25 years in the field of developmental disabilities. And last but certainly not least, and known to many of you, I'm sure, is Winifred Winnie Schiff. Winnie is the Associate Executive Director for Legislative Affairs at IAC. She advocates at the state level for legislation and policies that affect people with developmental disabilities and their families and service providers. Prior to joining IAC, she worked as a Director of Marketing and Special Projects at AHRC, New York City for 21 years. Okay, that's our panel. So that's There are 7 folks there, all with expertise and all who can answer a lot of these questions that you guys submitted when you registered. So let me move straight to those questions because we've got a lot of ground to cover. So as I guess was in the introduction, we all know that New York has been in the process of going through this phased reopening. And the question on everyone's mind is what is next? What will be happening to service programs? And how will they be integrated? How will they open? When will they open? So what we thought we would begin with, we would ask each of our panel members to tell us what they have been doing in this planning for the reopening. And this will just be a brief introduction before we get into the balance of the questions. So I guess I will ask first, in order, we have a rough order here. Betsy, could you start for us? Tell us what you've been doing at AHRC.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me this evening. Good evening, everyone. So as we were ordered to close in March 17th, we knew that out of this, we had many uncertainties. What would happen when we came back together, if we were able to come back together, and how would we begin to think about that together? So we actually have commenced planning for a number of modes of service. So the key thing to really remember is that we're not permitted to open yet. So as we know, we're awaiting guidance from OPW. We are wondering what they are going to suggest as far as reopening. In the meantime, our challenge as we think about not only continuing to manage the pandemic, which we all know is still with us, but also how we think through rebuilding service in a safer way. So it's really a challenge of taking the opportunity presented to us to transform what we're doing. And so as we look at the K waiver, which has come as a form of government relief, we're allowed to bill for online services. And that is really where we started to think about reopening, is how we transform all of our business models into online content that can grow and continue to grow throughout the course of the year. So when we think about reopening, we are even staging it in a much more gradual fashion. We expect to continue online services. We're up to about 45% of our prior service levels online with engaging content that's been developed in creative ways. And we've learned a lot of lessons about that, which are really key for us. And we expect that to continue and to be always a blend of what we do in the future. We have also just begun doing some very beginning in-home service. So for people who can't connect online, we are going in on a one-on-one basis under very strict safety protocols for our staff and for the people we support and their families. And that just began this week. So that's kind of like phase 2 for us. Phase 3, we are thinking about 2 then expanded modes of service, which are really, can we go into the community again and do some limited 2 or 3 person outings in a safe way once the next phase of New York City reopening happens. All along, we've been taking walks and moving through open spaces such as parks, but what will be open is their way then to take the in-home service, maybe group nearby people who might want to go on an outing and work on a 3-person or a 2-person community setting that would be safe. And then finally, in the last stage of how we're thinking about it would be the very limited reopening of our facility-based programs. And right now, we're in the process of retrofitting those facilities, prototyping those facilities to see how we can use them safely. What kinds of partitions do we need to put up? Plexiglass, how do we use corridors to ensure that there's safe flow within the common areas of each facility. So that is really about the safety protocols that we've maintained all along for social distancing, for really helping follow all of that guidance we have using the protective equipment, the masks, the bathrooms, the sanitization practices, cleaning.
Right.
And we're looking at all of that right now. So we don't really expect to have people back in facility until September, October.
So
And again, in a
Betsy,
very
we want to
limited
get
way.
into, I don't want to cut you off, but what we want to do is, that's been very informative. So we appreciate that. It's a great overview. And so we'd like to move through our panel, get an overview like you just gave us. And then we're going to come back to you and ask you some questions about the details of sanitization, I can hardly say that, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that's all.
Thank
That's
you.
it for me. That was my overview.
Oh, no, that's not it. We'll be back to you. So, Fredda, are you there? Are you unmuted? Fredda?
Sabretta?
Fredda Rosen from JobPad.
Oh, nope, not me.
Okay, so we'll move to Glenn and we'll come back to Fredda. Glenn, you there?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Fredda?
Can you hear me?
You're going in and out. Okay. You there?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to move past you. I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm not on I'm having technical difficulties tonight. I'm not on my usual technology. Can you hear me all right now?
I can. I can't
Okay.
see you, but I can hear you. So Fredda,
All right.
could you just give us a brief overview of what you've been doing at JobPad?
Sure. But first, what I want to explain how our day services work, because everything we do is individualized and without walls. Every person in our program, we support about 90 people, so every person has their own schedule based on their own interests. So one person might volunteer at an animal shelter, another person might be taking classes at a community college, someone else is volunteering at a preschool. It depends. We don't have a hub and we don't provide transportation. So for us, the good news is that our reopening plan is being done individually on a family by family, person by person basis. And we can, we're having those conversations with families all the time, and the services for people have been evolving since we closed on March 17th over time. And there is some in-person service taking place on a limited basis. Primarily, we're providing remote service now. The things that we really have to struggle with are because everything that we do is out in the community, and of course, most activities that people are involved in take place at places that are also in the process of reopening. Is what is that going to look like for each person? Are the activities going to need to change? What can we be doing meaningfully with each person as things reopen more? And then what do we do to pull back if there's a flare-up again several months into the year? So we're working on that. And the other issue is, because we use public transportation, is can we be developing places for people to do things closer to home so that we can avoid public transportation or get to public transportation maybe with a short bus ride, something that feels a little more comfortable. So we're working on all those very individualized plans. Right now we're doing an enormous amount of virtual groups and individualized virtual work with people.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, Fredda. Glenn, are you there? I don't see you. Glenn, can you hear me?
Hi, I am.
Hi.
I'm here. I'm sitting here with Winnie. If in
That's fine.
office. Hi. Yeah. So I'd like to say, thanks for inviting me to participate. And I actually retired 2 weeks ago today, which is
Congratulations.
makes my sense of what's happening here not less engaging. I mean, this is a worldwide issue that we're all experiencing, but a little different. And so I would like to say that before retiring, I was involved with IAC for 20 years in different capacities. The last one for the last 12 years, developing their transportation system.
Yes.
And So in that capacity, what was happening prior to March 17th was that we were pretty much really working on developing something called our trans data system, which was going to be what we hoped and may still, if we ever are able to roll it out, a very integrated transportation support system that allowed IAC staff to do the routing of the buses officially for the first time in the 12 years we've been involved with IATS, as well as having live GPS systems on every vehicle and what are called Twilio messaging services, which were for the first time able to tell families when the bus was coming and offered them an application on a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, kind of an Uber-like map of where the vehicle is. And, you know, we thought it was a really important time to create a much safer and much more user-friendly system that was based on the needs of the rider instead of, I don't know, the needs of the bus company, which sometimes it looked like it was, and at their mercy. So that was going full speed ahead, and we were ready to roll out most of it on July 1, 2020, and that was delayed, obviously, by the virus. Yeah. We kept working at IATS on this system, the full staff of 11 people up until June 30th, where then I left. That was my retirement date. And unfortunately, you know, was the same date that we laid off 10 of our staff because we could no longer, IAC could no longer afford them with no income coming in. And so in that period, particularly from March till June 30th, I spent a lot of time and transferred a lot of this information to on what to do with our bus companies in terms of what are they doing, what's their capacity, what are they ready to do, and we started gathering information on procedures that they would use to fog their vehicles. There's a particular spray that can last up to 3 months where a virus can't live on a surface as long as no bleach is applied to that surface. They were looking at particular kinds of spacing. We were looking at other safety protocols and screening techniques. What kinds of techniques could our vendors be expected to carry out, be responsible for, and those kinds of things. And although I'm no longer, you know, day-to-day working at IAC or in this capacity, you know, I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I mean, I have a lot of experience. I really know those bus companies. I know who they are, what they do, what they're capable of. And I'm happy to help Winnie in any way that I can.
Yeah, yeah. So Glenn, that's very, very informative. And we're going to ask you some detailed questions, you and Winnie, because you know I know some of it. She's working on some of it in real time now. Since you're sharing screens, Winnie, could you just very briefly give us an overview of what you've been doing at IAC? We'll have again some particular questions, but just to move this along and get to the particular questions, give the folks an overview of what you've been doing to bring all the providers together to work on this reopening. If you could do it in 2 minutes.
I can do it.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. So a bunch of you that are on this call in this meeting are helping me, and I thank you very much for that. We've got about 150 people working on reimagining day services and all of the things that we have to do to reopen now and the things that we need to invent and maintain for the whole transition period, and then what we'd like to see going into the future. Because there are things that we have learned just as a result of the pandemic that, as Betsy was referring to, we want to keep doing. So we've got families, we've got self-advocates, we've got medical people, we've got program experts, we've got transportation experts, all on this committee. We're working with other committees at IAC, and we're going to ultimately get feedback from our entire membership and then collaborate with many other statewide groups that are also engaged in reimagining adult services. And Our aim is to present a statewide set of recommendations to OPWDD, and the timeline is short, so we're actually going to start meeting twice a week starting next week to finalize our recommendations. We are looking at two main areas, and one is structural, and that includes financing adult day services, logistics, including all the transportation stuff, infection control, and we just learned, or more and more people are thinking that the surface transmission thing is not as big a threat as the indoor air and accumulation of the virus in indoor spaces. So mask wearing is going to be a lot more important, and there are maybe that high MERV rated HEPA filter on HVAC systems, all kinds of stuff like that. Then we're looking at the programmatic aspects of our new adult day services offerings, and we're looking at entry services, support for families, blurring of service distinctions, which we've had to do out of necessity, and it's actually worked out really well for some people. Blending of remote and face-to-face services. Again, we were forced to get into this remote service delivery thing, and it's been pretty spectacular. A lot of good creative ideas and a lot of benefit to people in whatever their settings are. And then we're looking very specifically at technology and all of the things that we need to do to support our new vision, and also regulatory changes and getting rid of all those things that are holding us back from some improvements that we've been looking at actually for the last number of years, and now we see this as an opportunity.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a lot. So that's a great effort to try to bring all service agencies together and get input from families. So maybe if we have time before we leave, you could talk to folks about how you're trying to do that, because I think that's very important, because obviously people are going to hear a lot here, but they want to know how their voices can be heard. So let me move this forward. Irene, are you there?
Yes, hi everybody.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a little unsettling being labeled an expert during a pandemic. So I'm going to start with that. I'm not sure, things change day to day. So I think that I'm going to preface it again with just some thoughts, some of the strategies we've been discussing, and everything like that. At Eden 2 programs, we're really lucky to have a residential program and a school and a preschool program. So a lot of, even though we don't have approval yet from OPWDD to start the day programs, a lot of the planning and the preparations for day services has come into play with our planning and preparation for the preschool and the school programs, especially since we're going to be, opening in the summer for, summer program. So we've been, already been preparing our sites with facilities walkthrough and modifications of the sites, as well as scheduling of people so that they're not, in sites all at the same time, and the use of space to allow for different people to use the same space at different times. So distancing, enclosures, all the things that were already in place. What was one of our advantages is that in our residential program, we already put together a lot of the protocols, and a lot of our staff from the adult program have been working in the residences. And so we've gotten a lot of training done, and we've gotten a lot of preparation, and we've got a lot, we've got a COVID binder put together. And so we have that wonderful pre-shift health screening down pat now. And so a lot of that kind of stuff is, I think that, again, that's been a challenge. We're guided by science. And so we have a committee, we have a COVID committee that we run everything through, which, sometimes is really wonderful and sometimes kind of stops the movement a little bit, but sometimes stopping the movement a little bit makes us sit back and think, a little bit about what we're going to do. So I think that we've taken that away from in our planning process, that sometimes we just don't have to forge forward. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty because I think that we're going to talk about it later, but we do have we have about 150 people in our adult services, just under, between Long Island and Staten Island, and mixture of with and without walls. We don't have SEMP, pre-voc pathways. We don't do that. Our clientele, our people, the individuals we serve, tend to be people with higher needs. And so in some ways that's easier, and in some ways it's more difficult. So virtual isn't working out for us as much as, you know, we would have hoped. And so we're just hoping that as OPWDD, as the powers that be, begin to reimagine with us and with the help of Winnie and the whole team of thousands of people, I think, at IAC who are on those little things, that that choice, people should, and I'm reading the comments, and that we're hoping that choice to play in a way that we've never seen it before, that individuality, that people get to choose what works for them, because now we've had a chance to find out what works, whether virtual works, whether, you know,
Yes.
whatever works for that person. So, but we are center-based mostly, and even our Without Walls is more. So we're going to be looking at that very closely, and we have some few ideas I'll share later.
Okay, Linda, thank you so much for that overview. I appreciate it. So moving right along, Irene, thank you for that. Sorry. Moving on to Linda. Linda, we haven't met. Do I see you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, good evening. This is a little disconcerting. It's virtual. I'll never get used to it. I want to shake your hand. I want to see you. Where are you?
shaking hands virtually. So we're all getting used to this virtual, and it's amazing, right? First of all, I just want to thank you for having me be part of this, and I'm very impressed with, you know, the number of people that are part of this town hall. It's just incredibly impressive, as well as the other panel members. So at Hartshire, just a little bit about us. We are in New York City. We're in 3 boroughs. We actually support over 650 people in our day services. About 600 of them are in site-based day hab, but we also do community pre-vocational, SEMP. We have an existing community community habilitation for people who don't want to go to a traditional day program. We were already doing that for a number of people, and we have also a Day Hab Without Walls program. So we kind of have this mix of services already, and what we've had to do is just relook at everything like everyone else. So a majority of our regular day services, center-based day services staff have been redeployed to the residences, and like Irene said, they're getting a lot of good learning in that location, because they're going through all the training and learning how to use all different kinds of technology also in working with the individuals. One of the things that we are very fortunate to have, we have a program called Art Share, which does have some grant funding, and we have been able to convert a lot of our Art Share activities to virtual and expand upon them. So we're doing virtual art lessons. We are doing things with a group called Beat Rockers, where people learn to do rhythms, doing weaving classes, and we're just starting to get into some performing arts classes virtually. So there is an incredible wealth of opportunities out there once you start looking for them. We've been doing a lot of virtual services. Some of our staff have been working from home. Some have been going into our centers and working there. We've had to purchase Chromebooks for people because many of the individuals who live at home don't have access to technology. So that's something that's been important, just to make sure that people can participate that way. And we're doing the full mix of, the ComHab day and et cetera, et cetera. We're just starting to do some more one-on-one with people who live at home, where we're going and taking them out in the community. And we think that's going to be something that will expand. As we look towards September, and like everyone else, we're thinking that probably the day programs will open in some form, reopen in some form, but at a much reduced capacity. So we're, like everyone else, looking at how many people will be able to attend.
We'll get into a lot of that detail.
Sure. But I do want to say just 2 things. I want to say that our priorities are for the individuals living at home, because we know that that's going to be the biggest challenge, and that we have to be flexible and creative. And that's, that's our focus.
Flexible and creative.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Ravi, you there? Robbie?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good, okay.
Hi, Carlene.
Yeah, if you could just give us a brief overview, because I want to get right into some of these details with you guys. So
I will be very brief,
I
Carlene.
appreciate that, Robbie. Can I
Sure.
see you?
My camera's on, yes.
Okay, this is killing me. Okay, there you go. Okay,
right.
thank you.
So just a brief overview. I don't know if, YI has over 16 locations spread, and I'm talking about day habs at this point, all the way from Rockland and all the way out to Suffolk and all the boroughs in between. We support close to 1,700 people in our day programs, ranging the day programs range in size from anywhere from 25 to 250. So as we think about what we're doing right now is I don't need to repeat what everybody else is doing because that's really what is allowed at this point. But how do we think about how we transition all our day programs, keeping in mind the health and safety of everybody as we think about day programming? Mm-hmm. I think the one thing which we can walk away from what we are going through right now is there are some things which we are all learning, which we thought we could not do before. And some things we realize don't work at all. So there's no doubt, I think having one size fits all and move forward is definitely not going to work. So what can we learn during this time? As we move into the future, we're thinking what transportation is going to look like. How are we going to transport 1,700 people and keep everybody safe? That is a big challenge. I mean, New York City, with its vaunted subway and bus system, is struggling with all of that. How are we going to have people come into many of our sites, brick and mortar, and still maintain the health and safety and all the precautions and protocols around social distancing and et cetera? How are our staff going to meet all the requirements and then for us to keep our day programs fiscally viable? I mean, I think all these questions, some of them are huge, some of them we think we have the answer. Some of them, I think OPWDD probably has to do a lot of work as they think about how day programs can actually change to accommodate all of these. So I think we are looking for some guidance from OPWDD, but also at the same time, that doesn't stop us from looking at all of these facets as we move into the fall. But one thing everybody is quite certain is, and everybody understands this, is day program as we know it is not coming back the way it is. So there has to be more creativity out there, more flexibility out there on everybody's part, on providers, definitely. On OPWDD, absolutely. But I think families also will probably need to come to this realization, day programs as we know it are not going to be the same. So I think we can-
Robbie, you have actually given us a great segue into the first question that came from our assembled group. So while I have you here, could I start with you?
Yeah.
So you say day programs won't be the same. Many of the folks assembled want to really know what we think those day programs will look like. And I want to start with walls. I want to start with the brick and mortar.
So there's no doubt.
Realizing we have all the issues that everyone signed on understands with the virus, certainly before we figure out how to get it behind us, which may be a while. What do you think these brick and mortar sites, what are you studying? I mean, we're talking about, distancing, not many people in a building as before, sanitization, phasing. When you sit down with your folks, what are you envisioning that they will look like? And what do you think we need to think that you can offer so that these parents, the families can think about what is realistic and what they can ask for?
So what they can ask for is, and YI is committed to ensuring that everybody we were supporting before will be supported. That is not going to be questioned. Everybody who we were supporting has to be supported in a safe manner. That cannot be questioned. But what I think everybody needs to understand is that bus which comes and picks up and has 25 people with a matron and a driver, I just don't see how that's going to happen. I don't see how you can have, in a site-based program, 10 people and 4 staff in a room. I just don't see how that's going to happen, no matter whether you put on sneeze guards or sneeze partitions or whatever it is. There's definitely going to be some guidance around what the capacity for people to be in a building. That has to happen. It's happening in our office buildings, schools. I mean, you just saw what New York City just came out with, right?
We did.
So
Right.
What's happening there is going to be very similar there. So then the question for us becomes, how are we going to make this happen? Now, here's the other variable in all of this is, and I think Irene just mentioned it earlier, it's becoming more and more clear that the virus spreads, there's an airborne transmission component to it, and people who are asymptomatic or are not showing the symptoms yet are the ones who carry it. So maintaining a safe distance, if it's airborne, I mean, it's clear that the 6 feet, social distancing rule has to be followed, although I hear school districts in some places are even discussing whether it should be 3 feet in between. I think given the age and the underlying conditions which a lot of people we support have, I don't see how that's possible that you can have less than 6 feet in between. We are in the process, at least, so we are starting off with the group homes. We are starting to look at where everybody in our group homes, for example, and I think that will slowly transition into our day habs also. We are starting to develop a risk profile for everybody we have in our group homes. What is their risk to getting sick? We are coming up with those plans. We're doing antibody testing on everybody in our residences. And we are going to look at age, underlying health conditions, previous respiratory illnesses, their behavior patterns, and their antibody test results as a way of somehow informing us what is their ability to withstand an infection. Then that's the same, because that then will inform us who can go where. Maybe people with a very low risk who are younger, are antibody positive, maybe they can be in indoor locations more. People who are older and have underlying health conditions, are immunocompromised, I just don't see how they can actually go to many of the open sites as we get into the fall. So how do we think about day programming for them, right?
Okay, that I understand what you just said. I'd like to bring, I think, a couple of other folks in on this. Betsy, you just heard what Ravi said. Are you in agreement? Is that what you guys are doing over at AHRC? The same, different?
Well, we are in touch with every single family and every single person that we supported prior to the closure. So we have an inventory and we've been in weekly contact, if not more, with folks. So we're planning for each person's needs. So for people at home that have been home and are not able to get online. So, we equipped everyone with an iPad and a one-touch capability.
I don't want to be, but let's just focus. If we could focus on the brick and mortar.
Right, so I'm getting there because I see all of the panel questions coming in about the higher needs folks, right?
Yeah,
so what I'm saying is that
But just
We are in touch with every single person, and we are addressing their needs for continued day programming according to those needs. So if you are a person that we cannot support online at home because you can't get online, we are making alternative plans. So right now, this week, we are coming into homes, working one-on-one, right, with people that cannot formally get online. And in the brick and mortar, when we open, we are going to have individuals come in first in that limited seat capacity who have high needs. So if you're home right now, we can't connect with you in any other way. We can't see you in the home and you have significant need, you will be among the first people to come back into our site-based programs. So in brick and mortar, we are really looking at that limited capacity to meet the needs of the people that need physical support, behavioral support on a more ongoing basis than we can provide online or in community or in home. So
yeah,
that's how we're going to prioritize.
Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted you. That's exactly what I wanted to know, because I know that people are concerned about people that may be deemed to be higher risk, and no one wants anyone left behind or underserved.
Right.
So what you're telling us is you're prioritizing those individuals to come in.
Yeah, so we are addressing everything that we know about the need specific to the person's need. And we know that there are people that need to come back into the sites, and those are the first people that we plan to bring back. Now, you know, how many we can bring back, that's what we have to plan for. So is it 10% of our prior capacity? You know, is it 20%? What's safe? And that's where we're planning now and looking at it with the expectation that those will be the first people back into the sites.
When you say first people back, do you anticipate that if you did that, that you would have some sort of rotation or phasing where they would come back and then maybe for 3 days and then maybe another group would come back for the next 3? Or how are you envisioning that, just to give people a sense of this?
Yes, it could be any kind of scenario that works to stagger. It's going to depend on how we look at the support needs of the people. We can do a hybrid if we can do some online content and support some things like psychotherapy at home. And then in program, we do other things like physical therapy. We would do that. Behavior support is obviously very challenging. The other thing we're doing is that we're going to serve people closer to home. So this transportation issue that people have really brought up, we're relocating people. So if you were served in a site and we transported you 2 hours across town to come to it, that's not going to happen anymore. So we are moving people closer to home. So you can come back to a site, but it's going to be a site that's very, very local to your house so that you don't have to transport someone for such a long period of time. So every single site that has people living around it, we're mapping out where we have those people and how we can bring staff closer to home in where they serve people and people supported closer to home. So it's a reorganization of the way we think about our service map. We're not going to transport people long distances. We're going to serve people close to home, very much in their own neighborhoods to the maximum extent possible. I'm not saying it's going to be possible for every person because it depends on need, but that's what we're in process with now, is looking at where we can serve people closer to home so we don't transport.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you for that. Linda, could you weigh in for HeartShare? Really interested in your brick and mortar day program.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're doing some of the same things Betsy's doing. We're looking at relocating people so they'll be served closer to where they live. We feel that the IETS transportation is probably not going to be enough and that we're going to have to be doing some transporting of our own. We will relocate staff who are familiar with those people to those locations where people will be going if it's different from where they go now. We're looking at probably full day models of service. So either like Monday, Wednesday, like alternating days or alternating weeks. Those are the two models that we're going to be looking at. We are right now surveying our families. We want to know from each family what their preferences are. in terms of their, their person receiving services, the frequency, or if they'd rather do virtual rather than coming back to a center base. So the other thing that we're looking at, like other people, like how do we keep the space safe? We're looking at how many people we can fit in a space. We're thinking it's going to be somewhere between maybe 30 to 40 or 50% of what the prior capacity was, depending on the location. Every location's different. Some are smaller, some have more space where we can spread out more, but we're going to have to do that. We are also looking at the air filtration systems in every location, and we're leasing mostly commercial spaces, right? In some cases, we own the HVAC system. In other cases, it's the landlord. So we're starting to look at that and what the cost might be of putting in a MERV system or something like that. And we're also looking, because we're looking at this with our schools, of possibly looking at ultraviolet light as a disinfection, which is used in hospitals already and clinics and things like that. And that probably would have to be something that's leased, but that could be a very effective way to also kill germs on a daily basis. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at in terms of our physical plants.
Okay, that's very helpful. I guess this is going to take a lot of planning. And I want to ask before we move on, does anyone have a crystal ball, and can anyone estimate when this might happen? Do we have any intelligence and know when OPW might give the green light for this? No? Okay, fair enough. We'll ask them.
I have a comment
so
on that.
moving on, I want to get to, we had a lot of people put a lot of questions in. So let me move to, and I want to group these. A lot of people are concerned about sanitizing the spaces. We've talked about some of this, the ultraviolet light, the, the HEPA filters, et cetera, et cetera. But, in more detail, I know you're probably looking at that, but also the PPE supply. Are you at all concerned that we have a continuous supply that can get us through these months once we reopen and start doing all these things? Folks are concerned about that. Anyone can weigh in on that. Irene, what are you hearing? What about the PPE supply? Are we okay, or?
I can speak for our agency. And,
yeah, sure.
We are okay in our agency, and okay. We've been planning, our residential was always okay, although sometimes it didn't feel like we were going to be okay because we didn't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. But we wound up having enough, and we're planning for a 3-month supply going forward. So when our schools open, when we get things up and running, because we are center-based and we do have people with higher needs. So we're hearing from our parents, and our parents are split, but I think leaning towards, sending them back because they're happy at being a day program. But we're purchasing now. I think that a good advice is that the schools are going to open, the prices are going to start going up again, demand is going to go up, and so you're not going to be able to get the PPE. So we're doing a lot of planning and a lot of calculating and understanding what we use, what we need in a crisis when we have active cases in our group homes, and what we need when we don't have active cases, and moving from there. So we've studied it, and we have good intel, I would say, to base our decisions on. Okay,
that's helpful. Before I move to day hab without walls, I want to ask a question that I think applies to both settings. Well, a lot of these do. There's a lot of concern out there when we talk about PPE to folks that simply cannot tolerate the mask wearing. And what are we doing to accommodate them, to help them out, maybe to help them with mask wearing, or to figure out alternatives to bring them back? I guess since we're in the walls now, what could we do to bring them back into the spaces? What are we thinking about that as we sit down and do this planning? Raise a hand, whoever wants to answer that. Linda, I saw you.
I would like to comment on that. So obviously we have to serve people who can't tolerate wearing masks. They require the services, we have to serve them. I think, we're trying to train people where we can. But I also think we're going to be looking at other options. Would somebody tolerate wearing a face shield if they can't tolerate wearing a mask? We're going to have to try different things. But at the end of the day, if they can't tolerate it, we're going to just have to figure out how to protect the staff as best we can, to socially distance as best we can, and to ensure that the people get services because they need them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Ravi, you down there? Any ideas, folks that can't wear masks? There may be, what are you thinking?
Well, so just like any behavior, we've got to desensitize it, right? I mean, that's some of it we'll just have to. I think social distancing is absolutely going to matter. So that's when our individualized, what the individualized plans we are coming up with for each person will take that into account and put in interventions, whether they are behavioral interventions or physical interventions, which take that into account. All of those are all the variables which go into thinking who can come into a site-based program, how they can come into the site-based program, how they're transported. So it will have to be a very individualized approach, but on the other hand, it has to be done quickly, speedily, and this is about the time when we start doing it. So a lot of our day program staff are already engaged in looking at each person individually and coming up with a plan for each site around many of these issues. But I just like to caution, I think any of these there will have to be a lot of flexibility on everybody's part as we try and understand what the implications of this is.
Certainly. So let me move quickly into the Without Walls programs. The obvious challenges have been, the locations, many of the locations that folks are familiar, the volunteer locations, they're not there anymore. They're closed for now. What are you looking at as far as opening up those programs for folks who are served and want to continue to be served? Now, I know some folks may have opted for service in their homes, but for those who have not and who really want to get folks out of the house, back into the community. Betsy, I see you nodding. What are you guys looking at AHRC?
Well, we're going to gradually, as more and more things open, move back into community. I know it's been very difficult for everybody being pent up at home and in residence and not having any chance to get out. So we have a lot of demand to go out in community on community outings right now. So we understand that. And, right now, if we could think of taking very small groups, right? So maybe in the 1 to 3 person range, a meetup that's close to where they live, and then a day have without walls type situation where maybe they would do an outdoor dining right now, or go through a space like the zoo or a park or something that's reopening. So we have to phase that in as more and more venues reopen. And, that will include just us having smaller groups, helping people. The question of wearing a mask is key. We have had success trying different kinds of masks with people and really working on, can they wear more of a face covering that's different? It's a softer cloth. Are there are ways to tolerate it?
Yeah.
So we'll have to very gradually pursue all of that as the city starts to kind of reopen in these phases. But right now we're thinking 1 to 3 people closer to home and community with a staff member, and in a very kind of outdoor setting still where these venues are reopening.
Okay. And can you offer that service maybe prior to, folks want to know how quickly some of these things will be offered. Since some of those locations are opening up, is it something you can do now?
Yes. So as we connect with people in home and one-on-one, we're going to then look at where those people can participate in that day have without walls. and plan that next phase. So we will be bringing that back before we would open up bricks and mortar.
Okay, so that's, for that question, is the rest of the panel, is that true for your Without Walls programs? Can you bring them back, Linda?
But we have a small program. I think one of the things that we're looking at, because our program was based on volunteering, volunteerism, that what we are looking at to do maybe is to have one of our volunteer sites, a church or something, where we might have a base where people can meet, because I think we're realizing when weather's not good and things like that, people cannot be in the community all the time, and our traditional volunteer sites may not be there. So we have to look at having maybe some space that people can actually, you know, spend time indoors as well. So we're looking at, you know, we're starting to reach out now to try to find those kind of locations.
Okay, that's great. So that gives us a good sense to try to move into as many of these areas as possible. I'm going to move straight through to our residences now. And I guess a question that we did receive is, people want to know if individuals will be able to request day services in the residences, whether we anticipate that there will be any flexibility to allow that to happen, is certainly during this environment where things continue to be different. Is there any planning towards that? Do you understand that you anticipate you may have the flexibility to offer that? I realize you probably maybe can't answer whether you will or will not, absolutely. But I guess day services in the residences, you know, maybe at least partially, if for folks that may or may not be able to transport to the bricks and mortar every day. So is there any planning around that? So
yes, we are actually expecting to continue to offer that. That's one key area for us. And we use the same content into the house. We redeployed all of many of our day services staff to residents to help with daytime activities, and that worked very well. And so we have also the online content streaming into all of our residences. So there's more lively activities going on all the time. We put smart TVs in everywhere. So we expect that anyone that wants to continue day supports in the house through that to go as long as we can into the year as an offering.
And a follow-up question, I assume you're training, you continue to retrain staff, right? So
yes.
that they can, so the virtual, because that's an issue we haven't talked, there's so much to talk about, but
yes,
is the training ongoing now?
Training is ongoing. And, you know, it was interesting, the relationships between the roles, right? Helping everybody understand the different roles. And then residential staff also, you know, how do they participate? How do they support the continued effort? So it's been ongoing training, you know, 24/7.
Yes, okay, okay. So I want to move, this is related. Fredda, folks that are supported by your agency, and this will relate to others, we're looking at folks that are training for jobs. I guess a big concern, you know, are the jobs still there? What do you see as far as the immediate future to get folks connected back into a job site that were either in one or were about ready to be placed in one? A little more detail on what you guys are doing on the job.
It's a really, really good question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
It's
a really, really good question. You know, like with so many people, about 80% of the people we support who were working have been furloughed. And in the past few weeks, we've been very cheered to hear from many employers that they are looking at bringing people back. We've spent a lot of time these past 4 months maintaining relationships with our employers so that we can be sure that the people we support aren't left behind when things start to open up again. I have to tell you that we still have, you know, people who were in the midst of job development, or other stages of our discovery stage, or just getting ready to go to work. We haven't been able to do much job development the past 4 months. That just hasn't worked at all. So we're hoping as things start to open up again, what we've been doing is we've been still contacting people so that we are working on relationship developing. So again, as things start to open up, we can get right in there and start getting new jobs. But it's going to be slow. I mean, I can't say that we think it's be able to go to work and live happily ever after. We work really, really hard to, each job we get is hard won as it is in normal times, and I think getting back to work and getting people back to work, it's going to be the same situation.
Okay, thank you. So that we have time to open up the mic later and answer some questions in the chat, I'm going to move forward through to transportation. And I'd like to ask Winnie and Glenn to come back and just give us a very brief overview of what we see. I think we heard from Betsy and others about decentralization, so that people don't have to go as far, if at all possible. I guess there are a couple of concerns. There are concerns about the traditional travel on buses. Will the buses be available? There are concerns about those that independently travel. Will they be able to do so? Will they have to be retrained? What do we see on the landscape, Glenn and Winnie? And what do you think New York, and specifically, I guess I'll ask about downstate, will have the capacity to do in the short term?
So I think I'll begin, because what we've been talking about in our reimagining group is many, many options for transportation. So we want to have as many possibilities as possible for everybody getting back to services. So buses is one thing we're looking at, and we'll come back to that with Glenn, but there are going to be maybe 1/3 of the people who used to be able to ride a bus on a bus now. And the capacity for the number of people on the bus goes down if the riders can't tolerate wearing a mask. So it's very individualized, and like I said, we're going to have as many options as possible. So we're looking at maybe parents dropping people off, and programs being able to reimburse them for mileage. We're looking at ride sharing possibilities, things like Uber and Lyft, and maybe creating some partnerships with ride sharing like that. We're looking at travel training and making sure that everybody knows how to safely navigate the transit systems if we feel comfortable with that. So we're definitely looking at the possibility of moving people to facilities that are closer to where they live. And, there's a problem with transportation when it's a with walls or a without walls program, because everybody has to get somewhere, wherever that might be. I'll let Glenn talk a little more about buses.
Well, I feel like fixed route transportation, which is what IETS provided, and what Linda just alluded to, is that it may not be enough for the needs that are going to be so much more fluid and changeable. I couldn't think of a worse scenario to happen when the industry of busing, where there's had been a significant staff shortage in really capable drivers, whether it was MTA driving trucks in New York State or all across the country. And so, there was one graph that I had seen where they were showing a typical school bus that could sit 56 people, fully capacity, if everybody was just sitting there like an angel. And then that same vehicle was cut to 28 people if you were staggering with masks. And if we're talking about our guys, who many of them are not going to be wanting to wear that mask, and are going to be on a vehicle that, if they had to be 6 feet apart, suddenly that 56 capacity vehicle is down to 8 people.
Yeah,
that's financially not capable of being supported by anyone. And
There you go.
so I feel like a dinosaur in a fixed route business. You know, that's not why I retired, because I do think there are solutions here, but it's going to take an incredible amount of willingness to look in every direction that we didn't look at before because we didn't have to. When I first got involved with IETS, and I don't want to get into this too much, but 12 years ago we talked about, with many of the people who may be on this call, how can we transport people closer to home, because that's what makes sense.
Right.
And it's kind of a shame that it's taken this overlay of a virus to reopen that discussion in a whole new way. But I mean, I just know there are people on this call with incredible talent, and I'm just wanting to help.
And I want to throw two more things out. And one is that, yes, so the cost of transportation is going to go way up. And we already, you know, weren't funded properly to provide services the way we wanted to. But maybe there's a way to find some efficiencies that we could, you know, reroute some of the money toward transportation. And it's a temporary situation. So as soon as there's a vaccine and a good treatment, you know, we can go back to the kind of services that we want and have the luxury of, you know, we didn't realize it was a luxury, but this is a temporary situation and we just need to make it work.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's what we're all certainly hoping.
Can I just say one more thing about
of course.
and that is that, you know, I know that, you know, I probably in some ways, looking back, it was probably the craziest year ever to develop a very, you know, expensive and efficient transportation system that was going to provide extra layers of safety and communication for families. But at the same time, this system is so flexible that I'm hoping there'll be a way that, whether it's under the auspices of IAC exclusively or not, that this transportation system could be utilized by smaller vehicles, by more staff, because it really has the capacity to track and trace individuals with who are showing symptoms. I mean, we started to add some of those pieces into the system as we were going along, etc. That's all.
Okay. So let me, while I'm waiting and before we open up the mic, I think I'm seeing some of these related questions, some which I think we got tonight, but some of which we've had. So let's go through these. I guess there's a lot of disconcerting and disconcern. I know it happens for the school-age children. Is there been any planning? What is being done? Parents are asking, what can they do? They're concerned because I guess they don't feel that they are being supported sufficiently at home, and they have had to bear, you know, an inordinate burden of supporting their children, and, you know, and some of them still, of course, working outside of their homes and trying to support and, you know, have others come in and support. What do you guys know, and what can you tell us that you know that may or may not be there for parents? We are getting some questions about that. Anyone?
Well,
So
you know,
I'll ask it in terms of our construct, respite or what can parents do?
I want to start by saying that the retainer program that OPWDD made available to us and all of the flexibilities in that Appendix K, which is an emergency, you know, situation. It's an appendix to our 1915C waiver, the home and community-based services, really allows us to do a lot of things. And it allows us to increase the amount of ComHab that we provide to people in a very, very flexible way during the emergency. So as long as that remains in place, we can deliver ComHab that should be a support to families. Respite a little bit, but less so, because it doesn't have the same flexibilities that ComHab has right now under the retainer program. But everybody should know that there was a little problem with an FAQ that was put out by CMS, and it was a surprise to OPWDD, which might limit our retainer program to 90 days, beginning back to March 18th or 17th. So to the extent that OPW can solve that problem, ComHab is in place to provide a lot of flexibility. But we're going to have to wait and see if we can get past July with that.
Mhm.
I would just chime in to echo that. I see a lot of questions coming in the chat about the continuing flexibility to do what providers need to do to support folks in all these new ways. And it's very much a concern if the K waiver, which has helped us do these things and be flexible for families, is shortened or not continued. We will face a very big cliff in our whole operation, because that's really helped us keep going while we're figuring out how to put in all of these supports and planning. You know, it's the bridge to reopening, and we need that bridge or we'll just fall off a cliff and we won't be able to help anybody. So very important to advocate for that continued K waiver and that flexibility to continue supporting people in these new ways.
So Carlene, what I would suggest is, I think OPWDD is a bit out of step with the New York Forward plan, and I think somehow that needs to get aligned, because you are seeing multiple parts of the state open nearly back to what things are. Malls, etc., and movie theaters are not open, but in many parts of the state, they are open. So for example, YI operates programs both in Manhattan and in Rockland, yet Rockland and Manhattan are in very different phases right now of opening. So it naturally does bring up questions from everybody here, and rightly so. Why can't my son or daughter or brother or sister start doing the same things as what everybody around them is doing? And that is a very valid question. I think that should be asked, as long as us providers are keeping and following the protocols necessary to keep people safe. I think OPWDD guidance and what's happening in New York State in terms of opening is out of step. And I think we need to bring that back closer aligned, more closely aligned. So I can understand Manhattan may not be where people can go to a lot of places, but in Rockland, where everything is opening nearly back up to its fullest capacity, I think more things should be allowed in some of those places. So I would definitely suggest, and those are conversations we are having with OPWDD, is how do we make this happen? And I'm not too sure one size will fit all there, because there are some precautions as providers need to take around people who are more vulnerable. But if we can achieve those and stratify that risk, and then based upon that risk, start engaging with the community more, I think there will be more of a greater sense of normalcy for all the families also. I think, so I would strongly suggest that somehow OPWDD and the New York State get more closely aligned in terms of opening.
So I think I hear that. I know Winnie, who has been gathering a lot of this, it might be already on her list. And that's an excellent point, and it makes a lot of sense. So I guess we are, we've got less than 10 minutes on our formal clock. So I guess it's time now to open up the mic. So bear with me. We have, it looks like, folks, 430 participants. So needless to say, we will have to hear from just a handful of us. But if the first person wants to try to raise their hand, I will try to see if I can see you raising your hand. And so if you could— I'm not sure I understand. So if you could do that, is there anyone with a question for the panel?
I have a question.
Participants are raising their hand. Could you three, could one unmute now? I can't see who you are. Let's see.
I just unmuted.
No, I just unmuted. Denise Nix Thompson.
Thumbs up. Margaret Rouse Diallo, I just unmuted.
And Denise
Margaret, could you go first? And could you keep it very brief, Margaret?
Yes. Okay. My son is in a day hab without walls, And my question is, to the extent that the day hab participants are going to be going into learning volunteer situations, how volunteer sites are.
There's a very bad echo.
I think you have an echo. Jim, can you take care of it?
Yeah, if everybody has to mute themselves again.
Are you on your phone and you're at the same time?
If everybody who's not Margaret can mute themselves again, then we can actually hear Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
My question is, to the extent that we eventually go back to Day Hab Without Walls volunteering, which is the keystone of that program, how do we ensure that the sites that our guys are going into are sanitized, etc.?
Okay, so who would like to answer that? Betsy, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. Well, we know that most places have protocols. So to the extent we know that people are going to go back into volunteer at museums and other places, those places are all going to be having their own safety protocols. So, you know, as we go out, we see that everywhere. The social distancing, the marks on the floor, the numbers of people are limited. So we would help people, as we've done all along, because we still have people working in supported employment. We will help people understand as they go into volunteer those new protocols. So we would work with everybody that had a volunteer site, make sure they know what they need to do in those places that they're volunteering to follow along with the guidelines that the place institutes. So it's about learning what that institution is going to do and then helping the people that go in volunteer opportunities follow those same guidelines so that they stay safe.
Sure. Okay, that's very helpful. Denise?
Yes.
You mute? Yes, I can see you.
Okay, great. My question has to do with the move from for adult services from OPWDD to the Department of Health. What are you guys hearing about what this change will mean for the kinds of services, the process, regulations, etc., to move from a whole nother agency? How will that affect us?
You mean in the short term, Denise? Because what, you know, tonight we're talking about.
Yes, in the short.
About the short term, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone want to take that?
Well, while the Department of Health is taking an increasing role, and OPWDD is certainly deferring to them when it comes to certain protocols, especially with regard to, you know, limiting infections. OPWDD will still have a role. So we're not relinquishing everything to the Department of Health, but, you know, to the extent that we need to work with both state agencies, I know that the provider associations are really working hard to try to make sure the Department of Health understands that we are different and that we need different kinds of considerations, including you know, the full ability for people to participate in their communities to the extent that it's safe, and to not impose, you know, restrictions on us that don't make any sense just because maybe somebody lives in a group home with other people.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, Rob, I can see your hand raised.
I'm
Rob,
here. How are you? Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you.
Thank you. I just wanted to throw out some comments and for a response. A lot of the questions I see in the box are my own as well. I'm thinking more of the needs of individuals who have higher needs, who cannot tolerate a mask, who maybe can't wear a mask for a medical reason, who cannot make any progress in the virtual environment. We'll call it that. I'm understanding of all the issues that were raised, but a lot of us are really concerned now and in the near future. You know, we understand things are different, but what are we going to do to help our guys that really need more support, that every other week is just not going to do it? That can in essence, be more of a challenge for them. These are our concerns, as well as folks in the current situation who are in group homes who can't even leave to go to a day program in areas where it's otherwise maybe permitted because they're not allowed off site. And if they leave site, they can't come back. I mean, there are a lot of real and immediate issues for those with more significant needs that, forgive me, I'm not hearing much dialogue about at the moment. And I wish we could hear more about that.
Okay, so understood your question. Irene, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
Yeah, I mean, I did hear you channel and tell us all that those you serve have, in some instances, a higher level of need. Do you have any sense, is there anything you can offer to this gentleman and to his concerns?
Many of the individuals whom we serve have high needs. We began very long ago, even with the individuals who are at home, offering a face mask protocol, and we've had really good results, but we've had poor results too, because people are individuals, and even typically developing people can't wear face masks or can't tolerate them for very long. It was mentioned before, I think, moderator, you did mention that we use a different type of face mask with our staff who have to be with very close up, maybe have to have some physical intervention to help with toothbrushing and stuff like that. And so we have actually, we do that to enable, them to not feel like they have to be, they have to be set apart in any way. We envision going back to our on-site programs, and how we envision it is we envision it in, and I'm going to call them little bubbles. So we see a group of people. So this is not a genius idea. I didn't come up with it, but I think it's a pretty good idea. So how we see it is that we now with our group homes, and we would probably start with the group home, people first and try it out. But a group goes in a van. They have their staff, and it's half capacity in vans, but these are people who live together. And so they live together already, and it's half capacity with their staff, and they would go to the adult program, and we already have it preliminarily mapped out where they would have their own classroom, their own room with all of their stuff in it, and we'd have to buy more equipment, but their own bathroom, and the cleaning protocols that we already have in place, and the staff training that we already have in place. But they would travel in a little bit of a bubble, if you will, that would limit the amount of people they have exposure to. And so, and these are the beginning days, and these are, it's not a perfect plan by any means, but it's a way to start and a way to move out and a way to test the waters, if you will. So, and then we envision it, putting people together who are at home and having staff only for them. Right now, where we go into the home and provide day hab services to people in the homes, but it's one family, one staff. ComHab, one family, one staff, one site. We don't go from one site to another site. If you work in the residence, you're in the residence. If you work in somebody's home, you're in one person's home providing all of their service for the whole week. And so we do that to keep a little hub, a little bubble, and to restrict the amount of people that anyone, and even the staff, because you have to protect the staff too. We need them. We respect them. And so we don't know when day habs are going to open, but we're certainly, we've plotted out what that would look like in our heads, and then we would have a trial, and we would move into it. And as as I said before, and I think that the parents would agree who are on here, is that we really plan to continue to honor the individual wishes of our families and individuals. And so we hope that the funding is there, because we would like to keep going into the homes for the people who are comfortable with that and happy with that. And then take people out of the homes and bring them to the agency when the agency site, when they do, and even without walls, we do have a community center who we would probably not let the community in while our without walls was using it. So they could use our community center, but the community would have to stay away. And so, you know, and that would mean, and we would be able to then serve people who go to other day habs who live in our residences, so that we could be a kind of a one-stop shopping for a while until we progress to opening the amount of people and opening and broadening the exposure, because we feel safer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I know we got a little bit of a late start, not much, but I think, you know, we could talk about this and continue to talk about it. And I know there are groups of us that are working with Winnie that are talking about it. And so I would like to kind of wrap it up now. But what I think is important is that we heard what is being planned, and we can think about what we need. And what I think the next step is that everyone can voice their concerns. Winnie, you're nodding. You know where I'm going to go, and it may be premature, but I was thinking before we got on that, you know, parents do need an outlet. And I know there are surveys that are being worked on, some idea that there's some place you can put your input in, and that will get to the powers that be. And while we can't make them do things, we can certainly speak loudly and make sure they hear what we are saying. So what I'd like to, I guess, do is, if Winnie continues to nod and Ellie and Meri don't mute me, is to say that we will attempt to make sure that you have access to an instrument where you can get some of these comments and questions in formally, and then they will be seen by those decision makers who are making these decisions, who've already started, and we will be there with our concerns. So with that, I would like to turn it back over, I guess, to Ellie.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank each and every participant on the panel. I do appreciate, we all do your time, and, you know, your hard work, and, you know, your dedication, which to me, it comes through, and, you know, I can feel it. And all I can say is, please, please, please continue to work as hard as you are on behalf of our folks. And thank you. So I'll turn it over to Meri. Are you there, or Ellie?
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, Carlene. You're masterful at this. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will review the chat and get the answers and or relay your questions to people who we think can answer them. We understand your frustration. I still have my daughter at home, so I think you all can figure out where I'm at. There are no answers. I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish we could all have a seance and figure out what to do. But we can't do that, so we have to keep asking the questions and hoping to get some answers. We are in contact with Dr. Krassner's office, and we will persevere. We will get them down. We got them before, we can get them again. So stay tuned and keep asking your questions and stay involved with us. We're here for everyone, all people with all disabilities. So with that, thank you all for coming. I'm going to hang up and have a drink. And I hope we all do too.
Take care, everyone. God bless.
Everybody.
God bless everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the panel,
our
thank you.
presenters.
Okay.
Oh, baby, all over.
Thank you.
We can stay on the call and keep and just take out the glass and the vodka.
No.
You've had enough.
No, I haven't. No. haven't.
Okay.
I'm leaving.
Because Meri is going to start, I'm sorry, Ellie is going to start swearing, so she has to.
That's exactly. 40. This was a.
An
This,
incredible restraint here, Ellie.
yeah, that's.
I want to celebrate that.
It's good that we have texting going on. I gotta say.
Yep, genuineness, please.
All right, I'm leaving.
Okay,
I'm leaving.
I'm going to go ahead and end the call. Thank you all for coming out on a weekday, and I hope that this was valuable for everybody.
Right.
Goodbye now.